The managing director sent the Zoom invite at 4:32 p.m. on a Thursday with the subject line Organizational Evolution Discussion. Elena Navarro had been in executive recruiting long enough to know that when your boss schedules a last-minute call and uses the word evolution, someone's about to go extinct. She joined the call at 9 a.m. Friday. 3 people were already on. Her boss Marcus, the new head of operations, and someone from a consulting firm Elena had never heard of. Marcus started with the usual preamble. Market conditions. Strategic realignment. Optimizing resources. Then he got to the point. Elena, you've built an incredible network over the last 8 years. But frankly, your compensation has reached a level that doesn't align with our current growth stage. We've decided to transition your function to a more scalable model using external recruiting partners. Elena kept her face neutral. You're eliminating my role. We're evolving the model. Talent Edge Consulting will be taking over senior placements going forward. They can provide the same service at a fraction of the cost. The consultant on the call gave a practiced smile. We're excited to partner with Pinnacle and leverage the foundation you built. Foundation. Like 8 years of work was a concrete slab they could just build on top of. Elena nodded slowly. And my network? The candidate relationships, the client contacts, the referral pipeline, how does that transition? Marcus waved a hand. We'll work with Talent Edge to introduce them to key contacts. Standard knowledge transfer. And my non-solicitation agreement? The one I signed when I started? Marcus blinked. That prevents you from recruiting our candidates if you leave. It doesn't affect us. Elena smiled. Not big. Just enough. Actually, Marcus, it works both ways. What? Section 14, paragraph 2c. I have a copy right here if you'd like me to read it. The call went very quiet. Hey Tangled Yarns family, it's Brett. And if you're new here, welcome to the story of how a company tried to save money by replacing their top recruiter with cheaper consultants and accidentally locked themselves out of 600 of the most valuable candidates in their industry. Today's story is about Elena Navarro, who spent 8 years building a candidate network so valuable that it became 71% of her company's senior placements. And when her company decided she was too expensive, they discovered that the non-solicitation clause they'd made her sign didn't just protect them. It protected her network from them. Let's untangle this. Elena Navarro joined Pinnacle Executive Search in 2016 as a senior recruiter specializing in pharmaceutical and biotech leadership. Pinnacle was a mid-sized executive search firm. About 80 people. They placed VPs, C-suite executives, and board members at life sciences companies across North America. The job was relationship-heavy. You didn't just post positions and wait for resumes. You knew people. You tracked careers. You stayed in touch for years before someone was ready to move. Elena was exceptional at this. She came from the industry. Had worked in clinical operations at 2 major pharma companies before moving into recruiting. She knew the players. Knew who was brilliant but stuck. Knew who was quietly looking. Within 2 years, she'd built a personal network of over 400 senior executives. By year 4, that network had grown to 600. These weren't LinkedIn connections. These were real relationships. People who took her calls. Who trusted her. She was placing 12 to 15 senior executives a year. Her average placement fee was $120,000. That's $1.40 to $1.80 million in annual revenue. For one recruiter. Pinnacle knew how valuable she was. They paid her well. $240,000 base. Plus 15% commission. She was making close to $500,000 a year. But here's where things get interesting. When Elena joined in 2016, the managing director was a man named Richard Chin. Richard understood that if Elena ever left and took her network to a competitor, Pinnacle would be devastated. So he put a non-solicitation clause in her contract. Standard stuff. She couldn't recruit Pinnacle's candidates for 2 years after leaving. But Elena's lawyer added something. A reciprocal clause. It stated that if Elena's employment was terminated without cause, Pinnacle could not solicit, recruit, or engage for placement purposes any candidate from Elena's personal network for 24 months. The network was defined as any candidate Elena had personally sourced, contacted, or placed during her employment, as documented in Pinnacle's CRM system. Richard read it. Thought it was fair. If he was asking Elena not to poach candidates, then Pinnacle shouldn't poach her network if they let her go. He signed it. Elena signed it. Everybody moved on. 8 years later, Richard had retired. The company had been acquired by a private equity firm. And the new leadership had very different ideas about cost structure. In early 2024, Pinnacle brought in a new head of operations named Marcus Trent. His background was in SaaS sales, not executive search. He looked at Elena's compensation and saw a $500,000 expense. He started getting pitches from consulting firms that promised the same results at lower cost. Paper placement. No base salary. Variable costs instead of fixed. One firm, Talent Edge Consulting, promised they could handle all senior placements for 25% lower fees. Marcus loved it. Got approval. Then scheduled the call with Elena. When Marcus finished his speech about Talent Edge taking over, Elena waited a beat. Then she said, "Marcus, before we go further, I need to make sure you've reviewed my employment agreement. Specifically Section 14. Marcus frowned. Your non-compete? That's not relevant here. Not the non-compete. The mutual non-solicitation clause. She shared her screen. Pulled up the contract. Read it aloud. In the event employee's employment is terminated without cause, company agrees not to solicit, contact, recruit, or engage for placement purposes any individual from employee's personal candidate network for 24 months following separation. Personal candidate network is defined as any candidate sourced, contacted, interviewed, or placed by employee during employment, as recorded in company's candidate management systems." The Zoom call was silent. Marcus finally said, "That can't be enforceable. It's mutual consideration for the non-solicitation clause I signed. You asked me not to take candidates if I left. I asked for the same protection for my network if you terminated me." The Talent Edge consultant looked uncomfortable. "How many candidates are we talking about?" Elena pulled up her CRM dashboard. "According to Pinnacle's own system, I have sourced or placed 604 candidates over the last 8 years. All tagged with my name." "That's more than half our active network," someone whispered off-screen. Elena nodded. "It's 71% of senior-level placements over the last 5 years. Which means if you terminate me and this clause activates, neither Pinnacle nor any third-party firm working on Pinnacle's behalf can contact those 604 people for 2 years." Marcus was turning red. "We own those relationships. They're in our system. The system I built. The relationships I cultivated. And the contract you're bound by." Marcus ended the call. 10 minutes later, Elena got a call from Pinnacle's general counsel, Andrea Park. "Elena, I just read your contract. Did you write this clause?" "My attorney did. Richard Chin signed it in 2016. And it's your position that if we eliminate your role, we lose access to 604 candidates for 2 years?" "Yes." Andrea was quiet. "That's a significant portion of our pipeline. It's the portion I built." "Elena, what would it take for you to waive this clause?" "I'm not interested in waiving it. I'm interested in being treated like the revenue generator I am instead of a line item to be optimized." Andrea said she'd call back. 3 hours later, Elena got an email from Marcus. Apologetic. Said there'd been a misunderstanding. They weren't eliminating her role after all. Elena didn't respond. The next morning, the CEO called. A man named David Ehrlich. "Elena, I'll be direct. We can't afford to lose access to your network. What do you want?" "An employment agreement that reflects my actual value. No more talk about outsourcing my function. And a seat at the table when decisions about recruiting strategy are made. Compensation? $300,000 base. 20% commission. 3-year contract. And the mutual non-solicitation clause stays in place." David didn't hesitate. Done. The new contract was drawn up within a week. But Elena had learned something important. The company she'd given 8 years to had been fully prepared to discard her the second they thought they could save money. She signed the 3-year deal. But she also started making calls. Quiet calls. To former colleagues. To competitors. To boutique search firms who valued relationships over cost optimization. Within 6 months, she had 3 offers. One was from a smaller firm, Vanguard Executive Partners, that wanted to build a life sciences practice from scratch. They offered her equity. Full autonomy. Better compensation. Elena waited until her 1-year anniversary under the new contract. Then she gave notice. She left on good terms. Transitioned her active searches. Documented everything. And per her contract, she didn't contact anyone from her 604-person network for 2 years. She didn't need to. At Vanguard, she built a new network. Different companies. Different candidates. But here's the thing about great recruiters. The people they've helped don't forget. 2 years and 1 day after Elena left Pinnacle, her phone started ringing. Executives she'd placed years ago. People who'd been following her career. People who wanted to work with her again. She didn't solicit them. They came to her. Within 18 months at Vanguard, Elena had placed 23 senior executives. Her practice was generating $3.2 million in annual revenue. Her equity stake was worth $1.8 million. And Pinnacle? They struggled. Talent Edge Consulting closed exactly 4 senior placements in their first year. Their consultants didn't have relationships. Didn't have trust. Candidates didn't return their calls. Pinnacle's senior placement revenue dropped 64% in the year after Elena left. Marcus Trent was let go after 14 months. The private equity firm eventually sold Pinnacle at a significant loss. And Elena kept building. By 2026, she was a partner at Vanguard, leading a life sciences practice that had become one of the most respected in the industry. She gave a keynote at a recruiting conference that year. Someone asked her about the Pinnacle situation. "I spent 8 years building relationships with people, not filling requisitions. When leadership forgets the difference, they lose more than a recruiter. They lose the trust that took years to earn. And trust doesn't transfer to a consultant with a lower fee." The audience applauded. Because everyone in that room had watched companies try to commoditize what they did. Let's talk about what actually happened here. This is about the fundamental misunderstanding of where value lives in relationship-based businesses. Marcus looked at Elena and saw $500,000 in compensation. What he didn't see was that Elena wasn't a recruiter. She was a network. A living database of trust that had taken 8 years to build. You can't replace that with a consulting firm. You can't outsource trust. The non-solicitation clause was brilliant because it forced Pinnacle to confront a truth they'd been ignoring: the network wasn't theirs. It was Elena's. They had access to it because they employed her. The second they terminated that employment, they lost the access. That's not revenge. That's just contract law working exactly as intended. And here's what makes me smile: Elena didn't even have to enforce it aggressively. The mere existence of the clause was enough. But by then, the damage was done. Because Elena had learned that her value wasn't appreciated. It was tolerated until someone thought they could get it cheaper. And once you learn that about an employer, you start looking for the exit. Alright, Tangled Yarns family, your turn. Have you ever been in a role where your relationships or network was the actual product, and leadership tried to treat you like you were replaceable? Or have you seen a company try to outsource a relationship-based function and watch it completely collapse? Drop your stories below. Because this happens in sales, recruiting, consulting, client services, anywhere trust matters more than process. If this one hit home, smash that like button. Subscribe for new stories every single day. And remember, if someone says consultants are cheaper, ask them what it costs when your entire network walks out the door. I'm Brett. This is Tangled Yarns. And that yarn? Officially untangled. See you tomorrow.